Thanks very much, Florent, for the word. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. My name is Isabelle COHEN SOLAL, and I'll be moderating. It will be my pleasure, actually, also to introduce you to the panelists today. And to start with, we have Colonel Arnaud BRUNETTA, Defense Deputy at the French Embassy. If you would like to proceed to the scene, that would be great. We have online also two panelists. We have Stephen Meyer, CEO and co-founder at ZENDATA, there on the screen. Perhaps if you did raise your hand, excellent. And we have here also Nicola, Benz, partner at FRORIEP Lawyers in Zurich. And last but not least, Tomislav and Nad, sorry, Head of Cryptography and System Security at SGS Digital Trust Services. Thanks very much for being here. We have the difficult part actually to answer this question about, or at least speak and get round to Swiss-French cybersecurity thematic. And perhaps I will start the first question to you, Tomislav. What does your role imply? And if you could describe a bit your missions about what you do, and that could help us understand.
Of course. Thank you very much for the introduction. Greetings to Zurich. So my role, so basically I'm leading a team of security experts, and we are here assessing the security of product systems and services of various different companies and industries. So basically we do security assessments of products in the medical space, products like consumer IoT, industrial IoT. So really on a broad range of industrial products and services. And we are checking how secure those products are, and if it's relevant, we're also certifying certain products with regards to cybersecurity.
Okay, thanks very much. Interesting. That sets the scene. Yourself, Nicola, would you like to present your role and your company as well?
Is the microphone working? Yes, now it's working. Very good. So I am Nicola Benz. I'm managing partner of the law firm FRORIEP for another 2 days, because on 1st of July, we will be merging with the law firm Meyer Lational, and I will become vice president of the board of a law firm that we are.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We are positioning as the Swiss law firm of the future with a very clear focus on technology, innovation, sustainability, development of our staff. And so it's an exciting time. And that's my management side of my role. I am also an IT data protection lawyer. So spending an increasing amount of time dealing with cyber attacks, both the preparation and then when an attack happens, who to notify, how to deal with claims, reputational issues, and so on.
Wide subject, isn't it? Colonel Arnaud BRUNETTA, thanks very much for being here. So what is the aim of the military cooperation between France and Switzerland in this field particularly?
Good morning, everybody. The aim between our services is to improve mainly the effectiveness of the operational tools we developed in our two countries, in order to identify the threats, to categorize them, and if possible, to face the threat. So we know that cyberspace will not be, the threat in cyberspace will not be faced in every state. We need to work together. So that's mainly the plan of the cooperation, to be stronger together.
And you speak about effectiveness. On top of that, it means awareness, so that people don't think it always happens to the others. We're all concerned about that subject. True. Stephen, last but not least, may I ask you to present your company in a few words and also your mission, please?
Yes, for sure. So I'm the director of ZENDATA. ZENDATA is a cybersecurity company based in Geneva that's a little less than 10 years old. And our main goal is protecting companies and organizations, specifically based on the risk they're exposed to. So we do the threat analysis, we do gap identification, and then we put in place mitigation plans and management in order to be aligned with the risk appetite the companies have and are willing to accept.
Very clear, thank you. Then back to you, Tomislav. What are the, as we just said, awareness and effectiveness, and then categorize. What categories do you use to qualify cyber risk?
I think you always need to start to understand what you actually want to protect. So what are your assets? Do you want to protect the service? Do you want to protect data? And once you know and have the big picture of what you would like to protect, you need to think about what you would like to protect. So what's the attack potential? What's the adversary? Is it the script kiddie internet, or is it a foreign nation who would like to attack you and get and steal your data, basically? And then based on that, you need to understand what's the impact if something goes wrong, if you have a security issue, do you lose data, is human life a danger, etc. And based on the things, then you can derive the risk and then determine what kind of mitigation actions you would like to set.
So the most important is to know the goal, where you want to go, how you want to do it. Then
exactly. And what do you want to protect against and against what?
Nicola, yeah, a tough question for you. Is regulation agile enough to get round to the cyber risks?
Well, regulation is supposed to be technology neutral, and so adaptable to changes and the ever evolving business models of cyber criminals. But regulation is national. I think that feeds into the point on cooperation, and the difficulty is to have this cooperation between national authorities and education at the authority level to tackle cyber incidents and cyber attacks. That's the one challenge, not so much the law itself, but then how it's implemented, how nations cooperate. The other is, I think, a fundamental conflict of goals between data protection, privacy, on the one hand, and then cooperation and going after cyber criminals on the other hand. And that's not always an easy balance to strike between these two ideals. I think the law is still flexible enough to allow that, where you have the interests of fighting crime. There are rules that allow that to happen, but that still remains a challenge, I would say.
And just before, you gave me an example about how adaptable could be regulation about some cases that happened in the past. And so would you like to elaborate about, you say, Colonial case?
Yes, I'm sure you'll have seen in the press the attack on the Colonial pipeline in the US was a probably atypical, at least in my experience, atypical attack just because of the size of it and the potential for damage that it caused. But it was also very interesting to see how law enforcement here, the US, primarily US law enforcement, reacted to that, and how they've been able to go after the ransom that was paid, a huge amount that was paid. Half of it they have managed to get back, and the other, a large part of the rest, they know exactly where it's sitting. So although cryptocurrencies are assumed to be private, actually they're very public. You see exactly where the assets are going. You can follow them. And when I saw how much they got back, I think they're quite far in their mapping of a network of where these funds go. A lot of nodes where they will see where it passes through, and a lot of people just monitoring what's going on. So if it's a small attack, unfortunately, the resources are probably not there with the law enforcement authorities to do that. But when it's something as large as the Colonial attack, then it's impressive to see what can be achieved.
So it's a never learning process, ever. Colonel BRUNETTA, so you said there is a collaboration, but what is your role pragmatically?
My role is to make sure that every decision that has been taken between the states is efficient between the units. I mean, the objective we have is to structure all the activities we have, be it at the strategic decision level down to the expert level behind his computer. And so, as you said priorly, we need to align the rules, the concept, the doctrines, just to make sure that every people at his level is able to work in cooperation with French and Swiss cyber experts. So this means we need to develop some agreement at state level to make sure that everything will run smoothly. If not, then exchanges of confidential information will never happen, which might be a showstopper when we want to tackle cybersecurity. So that's mainly my role, just to smoothen everything that is going on between our two nations at the defense level.
So it's really an enabler about
Exactly.
Speaking the same language, settling the sort of standards. Great, Stephen. I know that your company is dealing with difficult cases, and people come to you when they're completely stressed out, actually, and you call ZENDATA. But what is your definition of success in your field?
Well, this is a complicated question, because actually it's very difficult to put success on cybersecurity. I mean, if we compare it to, for example, a cleaning service, you come to your office is seen, success. But how do you calculate success with cybersecurity? Because you can only actually calculate failure. So what we try to do is really to understand what are we trying to protect against. So who are our adversaries? Who are the threat actors who are trying to attack us? And what is the risk appetite we have? How much risk are we willing to take? And then what we try to calculate is our protections good enough to protect against the tools and the techniques used by our threat actors? And are we within the boundaries of our risk appetite? And I think this is why compliance is something that's very interesting and very attractive, is that success in cybersecurity is something that you will never really achieve, but compliance is something that's doable. Being 100% compliant, this is something doable and achievable. So I guess the lack of whether tools for measuring success in cybersecurity can be compensated or should be looked at as a way of being compliant based on cybersecurity criteria.
So it's more about anticipation than curing.
Yes. I mean, anybody would need to have a strategy that has the tools to protect in order to be preemptive, but also to detect and respond in order to assume that breach might happen. And if it's going to happen, we have the ways for the company not to suffer too much and survive it and move forward.
And your intervention is more at the operational level, or should it be at the board of directors or even board members?
Yes, so we deeply believe that cybersecurity is a C and board level, board members level. At the end of the day, we're talking about risk attacking the business, and this is C-level decisions. What are we accepting to take as a risk? And at the end, we're talking about something that's technical, but the strategy, the involvement, the decisions definitely have to come up. Otherwise, they're never going to work through.
All right, thank you. Tomislav, how do you set boundaries to focus on risks where the web is as big as the universe? So it's really, you try to define and get borders to the problems. So how do you set that, categorize, as Mr. Colonel BRUNETTA said earlier?
Right, yeah, it's even getting bigger and bigger day by day, right? So you can look at two different angles to that. On one hand, everything on the web, everything digital is basically a product, a system, or a service owned by some company. So who is responsible for the cybersecurity? That's basically the first thing you need to consider. And behind everything is mostly a company, and those are responsible for making whatever they are doing cyber secure, and they need to be made accountable for this aspect as well. On the other angle to view it is that on the government level, you can set priorities like critical infrastructure need to be specifically protected, and then you can put regulations in place to make sure that companies providing services or products in this area actually following basic security principles and can make accountable for issues in that field.
So the priorities could be set like the financial impact, for instance.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. And Nicola, what is the biggest challenge today now?
I think it's the scale of the problem. If you see the statistics that 1/3 of Swiss SMEs have already been attacked, it's not really a question of if, it's more a question of when. And that is a huge challenge that the level of awareness is, as you were saying, Isabelle, is maybe not there. Switzerland is perceived as a soft target. There is wealth around. There's not the same level of security that you might find in other places. So that's a big challenge. Then there's the increasing sophistication of the attacks. What we're seeing now with the double extortion attempts. First of all, the demand for a ransom payment to deblock data that's been encrypted. Requires a decision, do it, not do it. Depends a bit how good your backups are. Do you really need the data? How quickly do you need to become operational again? And then the second leg, ransom demand to avoid disclosure of the data, which if it's personal data can be very tricky for companies to decide if all the information on their customers' credit cards or health records is suddenly out there, or passwords or whatever it is. And that's a really tough decision. I think at board level, that's something that is very important to discuss in advance, before the emotions and the pressure of an attack are in the room, to decide whether you would pay or not pay in those circumstances.
Colonel BRUNETTA, so you try to make people talk, speak the same language, collaborate. What is the hot topic at the moment in your mission, in your department?
You mean in cybersecurity? We are trying to be more and more operational. So we definitely were able to run strategic and level exchanges. I mean, confidential information about the knowledge of the threat. We need now to have the experts, the users behind their computers work together. We did something very interesting in April. We ran an exercise, a NATO exercise, and we had a joint team between Swiss and French experts in Rennes, where we have our French cyber campus. The objective was first to learn one from each other, and then to see how we could be stronger together, because sometimes your expert complement the other ones. So that's currently where we stand. We have developed a good structure, interconnected, and now we need to be efficient, that is really to face the threat. The next level might be to enter the offensive operation. As you know, France is running offensive operation, which is quite important since it has a very high level dissuasive role towards the threat. When they know that you can hit them, then they react completely differently. So this is the next step. We are not working on it. We have still things to do, but it will come very soon.
So it's really to put in perspective where you need to defend yourself.
Exactly.
You mentioned about confidentiality. Would you give your definition? Because actually it's confidentiality is a data that is at some point not known to everyone, but it will come out at some point. So it means that for how long is it confidential? How do you define it?
Yes, confidentiality in defense is big. It's huge, because when you know, you're strong. So we call it first intelligence, is to know better the threat, and this is something that you don't share. Normally, you don't share it because you get stronger than your neighbor and your potential enemy when you know more than him. So this is something that from history, nobody has shared. In cybersecurity, this is something different. We know the threat is everywhere. We are not going to be able to face it alone in our country. So we need really to build partnership. It means between defense services, but with the civilian society as well. And as I said just prior, in Switzerland, it is the same. We have mixed civil and military organization. We call them cyber campus, because we want to have an holistic approach on this threat, which is very complex because we are just starting to build it.
And indeed, on that field, Stephen, considering that confidentiality is really important, or is part of the game, would you say that 100% of transparency on all attacks should be shared in order to prevent better the cyber risks?
Yeah, I think this question should be split in two. One is, when you're a victim of an attack, should you be transparent about it, yes or no? And I would start by arguing that when you're a victim of an attack, you are a victim. You should not feel guilty of being a victim of a cyber attack. Obviously, if you did not put any cybersecurity, then you did not do your job, and you should feel bad about it. But otherwise, you are a victim and you should talk about it. You should share the information. First, it's going to bring awareness to everyone. People hear stories about people getting hacked. It's going to mean more people are going to be conscious about the problem and maybe are going to defend themselves. But secondly, being hacked is something contagious. If I have a client that gets hacked, there's a high probability that his clients are going to be hacked too, because they're going to be used as a pivot or as a path to hack other people. So if you are not transparent when you're being hacked, you're kind of becoming complice of the hack, if then it moves to other targets. So I think this is something that has to be really taken into account, first thing. Second is, who is the real victim when someone gets hacked? And we talked about it just before. Generally, when you have data that's stolen, it's not your data, it's the data of your clients. So being transparent about what happened helps your clients protect themselves. Because if the credit cards are stolen from my database, it's not my credit cards, it's the credit cards of my clients. And I have to tell them your credit card has been stolen and help them protect themselves for not them being a victim of money theft. And finally, when there's a cyber attack that happens and you're able to protect yourself against it, so you defeated the cyber attack, then you have information or intelligence of how are the threat actors working, what are the IOCs, what are the TTPs, what are the indications that we can have that we can use to better defend ourselves in the future. And this is information that we have to share within the community, because as we said just before, if everybody is safe, it makes everybody safer. If one of the link gets hacked, then everybody becomes weaker.
Yeah, it's really the failure that gets into it. Nicola.
Could I add something to that from the legal perspective as well for the disclosure? And that is the obligations to notify data protection authorities if you have personal data that has been hacked, or if you've had a data breach. It doesn't even need to be a hack. It could be losing a laptop on the train. And there you have very short deadlines to notify. So you're pushed into being public about what's happened, at least towards the authorities. In the EU, it's already 72 hours from discovering the breach. In Switzerland, that will come into force next year. We don't know exactly when, probably around mid-2022. And the fines, if you don't do your disclosure, are substantial. In the EU, up to 20 million payable by the company. In Switzerland, slightly different approach, up to 250,000, but payable by the individual who is responsible and failed to make the notification.
Indeed, that might motivate actually for more transparency and disclosure. So Tomislav, so we've seen we shouldn't be victims, we should be actor, we should prevent the risks, but then does it mean that we all, as individuals, we need to be geeks and deep technicals? We need to know everything about everything beforehand?
I don't think so. So if you allow me a car analogy here. So if to drive a car, you get some basic training, but you don't need to be a mechanic, right? You don't need to understand how the car works, how it made secure, etc. You kind of buy a car, you trust the car manufacturer that it has been built securely, that the brakes are working, that the wheel turns in the direction you would like to turn. And there was an independent third party checking the car as well. So you trust that the car is safe, and once a year need to go back and check the car again if everything is okay. I think cybersecurity is very the same. I honestly believe everybody needs some basic training, so basic awareness training about the issues. And ideally, this already happens at the school level, that our kids basically, when they are in teenage age, they get some basic security, cybersecurity and privacy training to understand the issues we are facing. And then you need to trust the products, the systems you are using, that the company building them has done a good job and built cybersecurity inside them and protected the products and services. And then we have the regulator, the government, who basically put out laws to make sure that certain manufacturers, certain industries need to and have to build cybersecurity in. And then you have independent third parties checking if the security is up to date, if the security works as intended, etc.
Thank
you. In short, no, but we need all some kind of basic training and make sure that the whole system works.
Yes, please.
Yes, I come to one point from Stephen about transparency. When you get hacked, it is clear that you need to be transparent, to share your information with others so that we all are stronger together. However, if you release your information too quickly, you will get vulnerable. You show your weakness. So what is important in that framework is to be organized, to have structures where companies, where states can report to, so that we can share the information confidentially, start working a response, might be aggressive response, and then be transparent. Being transparent should not be the first step you mean. And that's the reason why we need to structure cybersecurity, to know where companies can report and protect themselves with an overarching structure.
Yeah, it's again, the information should go to the people that are in charge and not overall. No, sure, shouldn't be spread out. Nicola, perhaps the last question before we go to the audience questions. So considering that the risk is sort of everywhere, but it's like a virtual web, and the hackers are real, but that so it's quite difficult to apprehend this risk. And how do you manage to really get to those remote people? Because it's in different countries where the legislation is very different. So how do you get to those?
Again, it's a cooperation between the authorities that's needed. I think the experts anyway, very often can tell more or less where the hackers are by the times of day and night when they answer the correspondence about the ransom payment, by the patterns of behavior. And then it's about localizing down. But it's true, it's not easy, unfortunately. Hackers are not in the house next door. They are in jurisdictions that perhaps don't cooperate quite so fully as France and Switzerland would. And that is a real challenge.
Definitely. Yeah, I leave the floor to Emilie for the Q&A session.
All right. Does anybody have a question for our speakers? Do we have any questions online? Crystal clear from this side. Anybody here?
So waiting for your questions, I've got another one actually for Stephen. It's about, do you reckon that it's an IT and a technical problem, or is it a corporate problem, the cybersecurity matter?
Yeah, a very good question. And I would like to answer with the car metaphor that we just had previously. It's like asking if traffic safety is a car manufacturer problem or is it more regulation problem? And I think there's a IT part that has responsibility in cybersecurity, but it's just one small piece of the big picture. The cybersecurity, it's really something that has to be a top-down decision that's defined as an organizational value with every employee being involved. And even having a dedicated team that's not an IT team, where the IT team's only goal is, well, for the IT to work and to be productive. The cyber team is really this risk management, and it has a risk operation optimization goal. And this has to be defined and drawn from the C-level down.
Definitely.
We've got a question here.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. A quick question into resources of the company. When you have a big company, you can spend money on developing cybersecurity and fences. When you're a small startup, what would you advise a small startup to start taking care of cybersecurity? Because we know it exists, but we don't have the resources to pay hackers to protect everything, but we still gather lots of data. So what would you give as quick advice? How can we do it?
I might answer this because we had, fortunately, the opportunity to help a number of startups within this journey. Definitely, I would not put all the money the investors gave you in cybersecurity and have the nice, shiny cybersecurity tools. But I think that when you build your product, you need to keep cybersecurity in mind. The foundation of what you build has to consider cybersecurity as something essential, and as you grow, you have to be able to add these missing cybersecurity tools that you know are missing within your product, within your stack, to always be aligned to your threats. At the beginning, you're a small company, you are not exposed, nobody knows about you, so your threat level is low, you're not exposed. Threat actors are not going to invest a lot of money to hack you. And as you grow, you get more exposed, you have more notoriety, and you need to pop up your cybersecurity level.
I would like to emphasize that as well. So there's no need to basically throw a big bunch of money at the beginning to buy a lot of tools and such. The most important thing is to include cybersecurity in your risk assessment, to be aware what your state is, where your weaknesses, vulnerabilities might be, and then make a plan how you would like to invest and make things better along the way.
Thank you. We have another question.
Hello. So we speak about companies, but what we are going to do is the IoT and the smart city, because we know that states start to use digital aspects and in order to plan everything in their states. And we don't really spoke about that right now, but it could be perhaps a more leaking process now, because the IoT is not so well perhaps finished yet, with some foundation to explain that this mobile, we discuss with that, with a good security aspect. Do you have some clue on that topic? Because it could be the next good game for hackers, no?
I mean, I would like to answer that. IoT is a very good example about how bad it can go and what the state of cybersecurity is in certain industries. So if you look at consumer IoT, for example, we know we read a lot of hacks in the press, you know, smart door locks get hacked, my IP camera get hacked, etc. So there are plenty of issues in the consumer IoT space. Especially in this era where cost is a very important factor in manufacturing devices, security is often one of the first things which get thrown out of the window. And here what we see also, for example, on the European Union level with the European Cyber-Security Act, the regulator must basically step in and put in new regulations to enforce manufacturers to build secure products and show that they are secure on one hand. Then if you go away into more expensive areas like smart city, where you have also IoT devices of maybe from companies which are more cyber security aware, I think similar things will happen. That depending on whoever would like to build a smart city, is it the local government, the city itself, etc. They need to put certain security requirements in place for manufacturers to adhere to them. They need to make sure that manufacturers actually able to prove or to show them that those security practices are in place, and ideally show that it has been tested as well.
I could just add to that. Sometimes I think, I mean, there's always a company behind these smart cities and so on. Sometimes it's just a simple thing that can help. If going back to the Colonial pipeline, it was one password was hacked, and it was a password with single authentication, no double authentication. And you're dealing with a infrastructure, a critical infrastructure like a pipeline, and you don't even have a double protection on your passwords, then you could make life a lot harder for the cyber criminals just with a few simple steps.
Colonel BRUNETTA, perhaps a word about smart cities and the sort of responsibility from national power towards that.
As I said prior, the cyber world, we don't strip the threat between military forces and other threats. So in this view, the services in different states are completely needs to be involved in facing those threats. So we know it's difficult because it's the new state of mind to be able to work with a private company to face the cyber threats. However, we know this challenge needs to be tackled together. So I've seen how the cyber campuses run. It's quite nice. You embed military forces within the civil society and some companies, and vice versa, and it runs quite well. So I think that's the way we need to move forward.
That could be loads of subjects actually, but we need to wrap up. So as a conclusion, the awareness is so much important in cybersecurity. It's not there yet, so we all work about it and every day. Thank you very much. Big applause to the panel.